we're good to kick it off. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. And I know we still have a few more trickling in, but we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Thrive webinar. Today we have a panel for you, Women Changing the Game in Design. And we are so excited to have three amazing women here to tell you a bit about their experiences and answer your questions. In case you haven't heard about it already, Thrive is our professional development series that we've kicked off this year. And we've had about 6 so far. We'll be doing one more before the end of the semester. So if you've joined us for any of those, thank you for coming back, or welcome if you're brand new. All of our sessions are recorded and will be available on our website very soon in case anyone's missed it or you would like to watch again. But I'm joined tonight by my Vice President, Sarah Takatatsu, co-moderating with me. I'm Erin Gonti, the 2020-2021 President of the AIS, and I will turn it over to Sarah to introduce our panelists to you all.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for coming. Of course, reiterating all the wonderful welcomes from Erin. It's so great to be here with everyone, and so thrilled to introduce our fantastic panelists who have so graciously given up some of their time to answer all of our questions, our burning questions. So I'll introduce everyone really quickly. So Verche is a licensed architect and associate at Vines Architecture, and received her B.Arch from UNC Charlotte and M.Arch from University of Westminster. Coupled with experience from the Freelong Group and Perkins and Will, her portfolio is characterized by cultural, historic renovations, libraries, and university work. The deep-rooted meanings in her work are extensions of crafted, honest stories and a result of her sensitivity to diverse social cultural landscapes and an investigative design process. Thank you so much, Verche, for being here with us. Up next, Katie. Katie founded Past Architecture in March 2020. Congratulations, to provide story-centered architecture and design. Katie is building a process-centered practice to provide simple functional design that is beautiful and inspires. As the 2021-2022 Minnesota Design Team co-chair, she works with a multidisciplinary group of volunteers to serve rural communities across Minnesota. Thank you so much, Katie, for being here. Really excited to hear about all of those experiences. And up next, we have Jennifer Park, joined Bristol and Lynch as principal in 2019. So many congratulations all around, by the way. Very accomplished women. Previously the founder and principal of Jurassic Studio, Jennifer has completed acclaimed academic, commercial, residential, and retail projects through practices in New York, Los Angeles, New Mexico City, and Chicago. She is recognized as a 2021 recipient of the AIA National Young Architects Award and was the winner of the 2019 Dubin Family Young Architect Award for AIA Chicago. She was the recipient of the Burnham Prize, Curbed Young Guns Award, and named one of Chicago's Women of Influence by Michigan Avenue magazine. Thank you so much for being here, Jen. So we will kick it off with our first question, an introductory question for all of you, and we can go in order of Verche, Katie, and then Jen. And the question is, can you just tell us a little bit about your career path? The big question that we're all very interested in. Can you tell us a little bit about your career path up to this point? And of course, what was the most rewarding part of that journey for you? So Verche.
Sure, I'll start, and let me know if I don't want to talk too long. I was hoping to have Jen or Kiri as a precedent for this, but I'll just jump right in. So as you mentioned, I got my undergraduate at UNC Charlotte. I did my 5th year degree there. That was back in 2009. So I actually graduated during a recession. So of course, being young at the time, I'm like, okay, it'll work itself out in like a year. So I decided to go to the University of Westminster in London and study there. And that was inspired by some international travel that I actually did with UNC Charlotte. So I got a master's in architecture, cultural identity and globalization from University of Westminster. Came back expecting the recession to be over, and it wasn't. So at that point, I was still kind of looking for a job. I sort of fell into actually being a production assistant for The Bachelorette, the reality TV show, for a little bit, and was about to kind of go into that, transition into that as a field, until I got an amazing phone call from Phil Freelon to join the Freelon group as an intern architect. So that was great, and how I kind of stayed in architecture. So I worked at the Freelon group as we transitioned to become Perkins and Wells. So that was a total of 5 years that I did there. And then after that, went to work for a great small firm called Andre Johnson Architects. We were in an office of about 4 people at the time. And then after that, kind of transitioned to Vines Architecture, where I am, like, as you mentioned, currently an associate doing some wonderful projects along the way. And I think my most rewarding experience so far is actually obtaining my license. The rules have changed over time. And I know you all can start working on it a lot sooner now, which is amazing. Please don't take that for granted. But getting to that point where you finished your AXP and you've finished that last exam and all of the emotional roller coaster that goes along with it. It's a really great moment. And also kind of like get to the career now what moment. So it's been a lot of fun since licensure, trying to figure out how to navigate, what I'm interested in and what my expertise is, and chart my future. So I'll leave it with that.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Shay. Perfect timing.
I'm so glad you went first, Shay. It's so fun to hear because there's so many different paths to get into architecture. And I actually grew up in Western South Dakota, and I met exactly one architect before graduate school. But just shadowing her for a day, I'm like, yeah, I like this. And there were other things that I'm like, architecture is a need in communities, and traveling, seeing architecture was just really impactful when I was young. And so I took an architectural drafting class in high school, and I could just sit there and draw by hand. And I thought that's what architects did. I'm like, yes, I could do this for life. I actually went to undergrad for art and art history because my mom insisted I would change my mind, and I didn't. So after 4 years of art and art history, I went into, that was in southern Minnesota, Gustavus. I went to the University of Minnesota 2 weeks after graduating, because I graduated in 2010 in the recession, and transitioned into grad school, a 3+ program. So we started that summer, 3 years of a master's program. I got married that summer, and I stayed on for another year to get an MS in historic preservation. Part of that was because halfway through my master's program, one of my teachers approached me and said, we need an intern. I'm like, yes, no one's getting jobs right now. So they did historic preservation, specifically masonry. And I got to do a lot of fun projects with that, some rural projects, going to small towns and seeing how communities gathered around these projects and how they kind of just focused energy. And it was just really fun to see those stories carried on. So I love Vershay's, how her bio is listed, because it just resonates so much. From there, I wasn't getting the hours I needed to intern. And so they told me it would take 10 years because it took them 10 years to become architects. And I said, I want to be an architect before I have kids, and I want kids. So I moved to a firm that was wholly supportive, and I had 3 months there before my first daughter was born. And they said, yes, we'll get you your hours. So I was doing my construction administration with my big belly, and I got my last of my hours the Friday before she was born. And it just meant so much that they helped me do that. And so that was a pretty good moment. Like, I didn't get the actual number, but I had completed what I needed to. I had done the exams a year before. So that felt really great. I call my first firm a project-centered practice because it was all about the projects, the buildings, the history. My next firm was a people-centered firm. Codette was all about the support, being leaders, being volunteers. It's how I really got nurtured into AIA leadership. And then my last firm before starting my own was a profit-centered firm. It was RSP. And I think that's fair because architects kind of tend to pair what their clients needed. And RSP serves a lot of corporate and like US Bank and other professional clients. And so they care about that profit. And so I looked at that project, people, profit, all needed. But in each of those situations, I cared more about the processes that were happening and how systems and things happen. So I've read up a lot about business after getting licensed in architecture. And I just love, I'm a business nerd about all of that and culture and stuff. So that's where I'm at right now. Started my own firm, Pask Architecture, a year ago, and it's been a fun venture. How about you, Jen?
That's awesome. It's so, like you said, I love hearing everybody's trajectory, how they kind of first started, and like these kind of these pinnacle moments or whatever that then kind of guide you. Because I guess if I look back at my start, I like to say, like, I think, you could say this about anybody's career path, but I sometimes I show this diagram that shows how I think there's a crew of people that kind of, their career path is like slow and steady, right? Slow and steady. And then they're going towards their goals like this, right? And then there's like the other, there's maybe another career path that maybe, okay, well, maybe they're just a little bit more moderate or something like that. But still steady. And if you maybe look at mine, or if I were to diagram it out for you, I would probably go, it was steady, and then it did a lot of this thing, and then, but it's still kind of getting over there, right? It's still going in the right direction. Sometimes a few steps back, but then a few steps forward. So I was introduced to architecture through my, this is when I was in middle school, through my neighbor, who also was my fencing coach and art teacher, my future art teacher. So I did I say that? He was like, I did some summer art classes with him. He also happened to be the fencing coach at the high school there. And this is all in Wisconsin, mind you. Okay, so kind of like weird surroundings. And as I went to high school, kind of progressed, and really, I love art. I was, an avid painter. He had suggested maybe that I should explore architecture. And I was like, what? Like that word, no idea what that meant. And he was like, well, you love art, and you also, you also are very good at math and science, right? Oh, okay, sure, sounds good. So I signed up for a summer program at Milwaukee School of Engineering, and they had just this high school thing. We made, models out of foam core of, I think it was like a museum project of some sort. And I was like blown away. Like I love the idea that I was immersed in the space and that I could, create and define that, right? So that set me off in this direction. And that's where it was like slow, steady, I'm going to be an architect, right? Through college, I went to Columbia University in New York. I desperately wanted to leave the Midwest and explore something else. So I went far away, and to from Wisconsin to big old New York. I majored in architecture, but also art history, keep the art in there. And then after that, I spent a year in New York working for a firm that focused on affordable housing. I was of this, yes, this is socially driven. I was really all about that. But then after that year, I realized there's also more, right, to explore. And so I went back to grad school. I went to the other coast. I went to UCLA. And much to all my advisors, by the way, in high school were like, no, stay in the Midwest. And I was like, screw that, I'm going. And when I went to, the East Coast, I stay in the East Coast. I was like, no, screw that. So, right. So then I go to UCLA, did the 3-year program there. And really it was just, for me, it was because I feel like I had this exposure to the East Coast. So I wanted the West Coast. And after that, which was wonderful, I actually hightailed myself back to New York. I really enjoyed the city. And my first job was at Architecture Research Office. And I think I hold that office, quite honestly, as like kind of the basis for what I esteem for a practice. I really loved the culture. I loved the thinking. I loved the people, like how it, like we all were kind of focused on design. We had wonderful design conversations. So, then I think I kind of grew out of New York. New York was a bit exhausting. I didn't make a whole lot of money at the time. I lived in a very small studio, and I was like, okay, again, there's got to be a world that's greater than my like 50 square foot of my studio space. So at the time I had met my future husband and moved to Virginia. I went to Richmond, Virginia for a little bit of time, and then the recession hit. So it was like, oh gosh, I guess we're gonna stay here a little bit longer than I thought. And from there, I made it to Chicago, and I've been here about 11, almost 12 years now. And it took some time for me to find my way in Chicago, in the Midwest again. Like I was close to family and all that stuff was great, but like career-wise, it took time for me to kind of refine my footing because it was so different than New York and LA, and where I was, schooled and thinking and kind of absorbed in that culture. And I had to kind of figure out what Chicago was about. So basically, I did hop around, and I did establish at some point in time my own practice, Jurassic Studio. And that was, after establishing another practice with a partner. Like it was just a lot of figuring out. And I think I do this, but I say I did it with, a good amount of knowing and a good amount of risk. In that sense, like I knew in my gut that I had to take these steps to find my way. And, and now I feel right now I'm a principal at Bristol Lynch, and they, they're a company, they're a firm, let's say, that was established 30 years ago by 2 partners. And they're at this point where they're thinking about the next 30 years. And so I had known them, they'd reached out, and I thought, our values kind of same. And this idea of like, when I said the first firm that I was with after graduate school was Architecture Research Office, I see those values again. And that's why I was, really drawn to that. And I also, in terms of Brad and David as the founding partners, their vision for the firm, the idea that they see that they have to reach out and have to make measures to diversify and push equity forward meant a whole lot to me as well. So anyways, did you feel that? Did you get that?
Yes, definitely. Oh, no, thank you all for sharing your stories. And I think it's so great to just hear different experiences. And I think especially for students, there are so many different paths to get to where you want to be. And I like what you said, Jen, about, still finding your way and finding your place. And I think it's important for students to, think about that. It might not happen right away, and that's okay. So we're going to dive into some questions that we've prepared. And for everyone watching, please feel free to also send questions in the chat, whether for one panelist or for all 3, and we'll also be answering some of those. But we'll start with maybe one of our hard-hitting questions, and I think one that a lot of, especially young women, I know myself, are wondering, especially as we're getting ready to really jump into our own careers. So in your education or your career, maybe even both, have there ever been times where you recognized that you were being treated differently as a female in architecture? And how did you manage those situations, and what did you learn from them that we could take away? And anyone can start if you would like to.
I can start.
You want to go?
Jen, do you want to go?
Sure, I'll take the first spot this time.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I, would say that there have been a good amount of times in my career where I've been talked past, you go to a job site or something like that, and you're with maybe another guy or, another group of people, and, somebody like the contractor starts to talk and they are not talking to you. They are talking to the guy next to you. They are talking to the older person over here, or something like that. And, I think it's somewhat disheartening, but I think at the same time, it's also that moment where you get to correct and actually, I'm the one leaving the project. And then come in with that. I would say the other thing to be able to deal with the situation is, just come in and be that center of knowledge, that come in with your experience and come in with your confidence, knowing that you are leading the project and you are in that position. You are the expert in this, and they're not going to get they're not going to get the information except from you, right? So to me, I think that kind of still occurs every once in a while, for sure. Yeah, I think that's maybe like a more common thing that happens. But my advice would just be like, you just know that you're the expert, you are the experienced person, right? And not to sulk away at it, but I think it's kind of turn it on its head and say, okay, I got this. Let me just straighten you out here.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in and kind of add to that. I have certainly had that experience as well, kind of being on site, particularly with with an intern that was male, and the contractor walked right up to him and started asking him questions, and he was just like, "You have to ask her. She's the boss here." And so I think what I realized in that moment as well, as I've kind of continued to work with my colleagues, and even when it comes to sort of CA and site work and being on site, it's just having a real conversation with them about, this is generally the perception when we go on site. And while I'm able to handle myself, I need you to be an ally along with me. And so, especially now I work with someone that, he certainly has more experience and expertise kind of in his site work. But, I remember having a conversation with him and saying, hey, when we go out there, I know you're going to have the answers and I know that you can give all the answers, but let's talk about how we can kind of even alternate, because we have to put in the work and the thought, to break that perception that, this person that looks like this is the author and the holder of all of the correct answers for a project. So I find that, again, and kind of being open and having those dialogues with your peers, with your colleagues and your coworkers really helps. I would also say to, I guess, the front end of that, sort of maybe before you become a project leader and the one who's the most knowledgeable about the project. I know with my first job, when I started working there, again, I had my degree in architecture and I was like geared up and I was ready to jump into design. And I noticed that after being there for the first 3 or 4 months, I was the only kind of intern architect that had to kind of keep checking in with the head of interiors. And I noticed that my tasks were more assistant and related to that and less to the architectural side of things. And the way that the office was set up, it was a little bit more obvious to do that. It was a little less, kind of like everybody does everything, but, these people work on this part, this people work on that part, and then we collaborate from there. And, I was wondering, man, should I say something or is this an intern thing where you just take what's given to you and, eventually you'll get what you need. And as long as you get your hours and one day I'll be able to say something. But I talked to a mentor at the time about it, and they were like, no, you should speak up for yourself and you should advocate for yourself. And even in that, some things like that happen. And sometimes, they're looking at a staffing spreadsheet or something, and they're not necessarily aware of, what your interests are and what you want to do. So at the time, I also, I believe there may have been a system of like a review period, but I think it was like after you started working a year or something like that. So kind of taking control of that situation and actually requesting that and saying, hey, I want to sit with you as my supervisor and I want to have a review. I know I've only been here for 3 months and I have about 3 months of experience right now, but I want to talk to you about how you think I'm doing, where you see me going, what projects we're doing next. And then I also just want to talk to you about my interests. And I was able to say, hey, this is great. This is an amazing project I'm working on. Not everybody gets to work on trying to do a small renovation in a Mies building when they graduate. So I'm very grateful for that. But I really want to do some wall sections. How can we work together? Or what do I need to do to kind of get to that point? And I realized very early on, again, that you kind of have to advocate for yourself, and you have this more space to do that than I think a lot of people think they do when they enter into a firm. So yeah, just sort of breaking that perception. Just because I'm a young woman, and that doesn't mean I need to kind of assign into the interiors department. And how can we like course correct so that you can author your own destiny a little bit.
I appreciate hearing the stories, and I know I've heard of scary circumstances from some of my classmates. I guess my own path, I've never had those barriers or felt those barriers, and I think some of that's just the people I've gotten to work with. There's been small firms, and the founders of the firms were still there. They're now retiring, and so that generation is leaving. But I always connected with those older architects, I think because I loved that they founded their firms, and I loved hearing and connecting with them on that because that was a desire I had. And so I'd always kind of go in there asking them a lot of questions. And so I always felt they were my best advocates. There is one, I had to dig in my memory, but there was one situation where after I had taught a drawing class while in graduate school, I was in a meeting with all the other drawing instructors, and I looked around and I'm like, I am 2 feet shorter than everyone in this room. It didn't matter that I was a woman, but I was 2 feet shorter, and they were all talking like the prime of archi-speak, the phenomenology, and we had been told to bring a variety of our students' work. And I was a student at the time, and so I prepared that. And then an hour before the meeting, the professor who leads it all said, no, I only want the best. Well, I go in with a variety, and everyone else has these amazing things that like make my students look like idiots compared to what they were able to get their students to do. And it's like, I know I taught this class differently than I was taught by this professor, because he was just like, you're crying about this critique, you don't belong in architecture. He was one of those. And I'm like, I'm going to see what happens with a semester of nurturing the students. But at the time, I wasn't able to vocalize that. And so I was just so flustered and in that room and felt so small that I was like, yeah, this is what my students did, and didn't really explain anything else. And so I was not asked to teach again. And that still kind of like hurts a little bit that like I didn't fully explain myself. And so after that situation, I decided I would not let myself feel little that I needed to find my voice. And I guess there's still been situations that I'm like, I know what I know, but you're saying something different very confidently. So I'm going to say what I say. You counteracted that. Okay, I'll take my notes. I'll make sure. We'll see in a week when the contractor gets back to us. Sure enough, I had the right idea, and we just had to come back around to it. But I really appreciated how Verche kind of described finding her voice, because I feel like that's more of it in terms of, yes, we're young in the profession. Yes, we're asking questions and we're learning. But finding that gut, and Jen kind of talked about that gut kind of leading you consistently forward. It's a personal path, I think. And I think that's hard for everyone.
And I wanted to kind of go off of what you were saying at the very beginning, Katie, of starting your own firm and having mentors into that process. And I think this is kind of the spotlight is on, because I know there's probably a fair few in the audience who are also considering, oh, maybe one day I would love to start my own firm. So wondering, Katie and Jen, if you could speak to some of your experiences starting your own firms. And any advice that you got that was super valuable, or anything that you'd like to share about that experience. I know everyone would be really interested to hear.
Jen, why don't you start?
Yeah. So like I said, yeah, I started 2 offices, and now I'm leading another practice. So when I started my first practice, I had a partner, and I think I was very ready to like do my own stuff. By that I mean, like, I wanted to design, I want to be in the lead to design my own projects. It was very, like, I felt quite confident that I managed big projects, small projects. But I think I was nervous about the business side, the stuff that Katie really, takes hold of. I was like, I don't know that side really. And so when I had the partner, I kind of leaned on him actually to help in that. And then when, that practice kind of dissolved and we went other ways, I was, like thinking about, like, well, I wonder, can I do this on my own? Right. And it took it took a step in between there for me to like start it up on my own, Jurassic Studio at that time. And I really just had to buck up and be like, okay, like, I'm going to take the reins on this thing, and I'm going to meet my challenges and my, whatever I don't know, I'm going to figure out. And and in so much, I started to reach out to people. And this is, as you guys were talking about mentors and being so important, I do think it's really critical. I didn't really think like I didn't go there, like, the word mentor these days, I think is very popular, but I just went and started just calling people that I knew that, I don't know, either had their own practice or didn't. And I just kind of threw myself out there and emailed the people. And I started to learn that way that, okay, this isn't as daunting, I think, but that being said, the thing that, on the business side of things that I was nervous about, was what was maybe most nervous about was getting more work. I was like, how do I get work? I don't know how to get work. And I guess along the way, and even now, I just, I've realized that it's not, as I was like, I'm not knocking on doors. I do not cold call people. I just, that's not my thing. So, but what is my thing is I do enjoy, meeting new people, establishing new relationships, building those relationships. And that is what it takes. That is a key to, and it evolves naturally in that sense. Right. And so it doesn't seem so direct, like, as cold calling, I want this job, do you need an architect? But no, it's like, it is a longer process, but a much more rewarding and wonderful process in that sense. And then, understanding that really got me over that heap. I think leading a practice, so I think what I found is that you learn as much, probably more from the people that you're surrounded with, your staff, the other designers, the other architects, as well as those people that have much more experience, right, than you. And I learn a lot about just how we should interact with each other and what is important to everybody outside of just like hardcore architecture, right? But it matters as much about like how you think about design as just how you want to work and what environment you want to work in and how, what you want to be surrounded by. So to me, I've learned that having these open conversations, being open and receptive. I mean, as a leader, I think of an office, I have to be receptive to conversations and open myself up and say, hey guys, if you have, something, feel free, email me, let's talk about it, right? And that's been really, I think, something that is of value to me, to how I want to lead a practice, that extends beyond just the big A, architecture, and thinking about design. So
I love talking about being a lowercase architect
yeah.
because I really respect everyone I've worked for, and I'm not trying to compete or replace them. And I don't know if I'm scared to compete with them, but I do respect what they've done and what I learned with them, and I think they do it well. I think starting a firm is a first and last resort, if that makes sense. It's a first resort if you don't have anything else to do or any other job, just start. But it was also my last resort in terms of at each firm, I tried to stretch and I tried to see if they had room for me to participate in the leadership the way I wanted to help shape systems and things. And there were some firms where that was totally accepted, and I helped shape that firm a bit in my own little way. There were others that I just got shot down again and again. And that was hard because then it's like, oh, I can't see, like Jen talked about, finding a partner you can work with. If you can find that partnership, I think that can really make it great. For me, it took years to start my firm because I didn't want it to be a risk. And I wanted to feel like I knew everything I needed to know before starting. But as Jen is speaking, I'm like, that is exactly what I'm trying to learn right now, because I'm in that part of your career where you're doing all of this. I'm like a wet towel in the dryer. It's just chaos trying to figure out the relationships and stuff. It was the stuff I realized I would never be taught in a firm because they're not going to teach me how to get their clients. And there's some exceptions to that, but I was not learning what I actually needed, and I just needed to go do it. And everything else in my mind had been set in place. I kind of had some work with other architects to start me off. So it wasn't from finance to zero. It was something, it was a manageable risk for me. And everyone has a different level of risk that you kind of like, but I kept wanting to be more challenged. I just want to learn more. And so for me, it was just the natural place that I went with it. And it's right now the right thing for me in my career to grow into this. Will I be here in 5 years? It might be the right thing still, or it might grow into something else. Kind of working hard, no matter what it turns into, but it's been good thus far. I don't know, Vershay, have you ever thought of starting one?
I get asked about it a lot, particularly because my husband is also an architect. So there's always the family members, hey, when are you all going to do your own thing? And because we both graduated during a recession, we have also decided we're going to have our sources of incomes right now come from different places, just strategically. But I did, I am a little bit intimidated by some of the things that you all mentioned, just the responsibility and just how do you get work. But I will say, I believe right now I work for a pretty incredible firm in Vines Architecture. I'm actually a project leader there. And so I am put forth quite a bit as a face that needs to go out and build relationships with clients and win work. And it's wonderful because it's really closed the gap of knowledge for me as far as the way projects happen. I'm right beside my boss, reviewing contracts, in negotiations, at interviews, giving input on proposals and client meetings, trying to keep them happy along the way. It's a wonderful thing. And I think we're able to do that because of this sort of sweet spot of size. We're about like 18 people, and our process and our team sizes and structure are truly collaborative. So even on paper, I'm managing a number of projects, but really at the end of the day, we're all rolling up our sleeves and just trying to get it done for whatever that means. So I do think it's kind of fortunate. I feel a little bit lucky that I am getting some of this responsibility that I would need and this experience that I would need in order to kind of start my own firm. But I am very much enjoying the mentorship that I'm surrounded by, and the support to say, you know what, like that trust, like I trust you to communicate with the client, and being treated like, well, it just, you need to stay at your desk because I want to make sure I'm building the relationship with the client so you don't take them later. That doesn't seem to be there and be of concern with my current company. So I feel, again, very kind of fortunate, and hopefully there are other places throughout the, of course, the state of North Carolina and throughout the country where those opportunities do exist.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
It's very good to hear, and something to look for as you're finding a place
Yes.
that you can work and pair yourself with.
Yes.
I'm going to quickly share an article that was written on a few architects starting firms back a year ago. It interviewed 6, and it's got a checklist that I helped make of how to start your own firm, which is just one way to do it.
Oh, that's awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing. We do have some questions coming in from our audience, so we do want to ask those. So we'll start with one here. It says, I am a non-traditional student. This is my second career, graduating with an MArch next month. Congratulations. Is there any advice you would give to someone starting out who is older than the typical new architect?
Hey, all right, good to see you. I would say kudos. I'm just like, I actually think coming in with more experience, being, a little bit wiser, have been around the block, right? Like, that's good. That's good stuff, because you go in with an awareness, and I think that's appreciated. I have always found that especially, I mean, I have friends who for family reasons or whatever, have taken a break and tried to come back in, or come back, let's say, to the profession. It's a struggle. It's hard. It's not as well accepted as it should be, I think, for sure. But for somebody who's like a second career, and I think I would just say show off that maturity, right? Show off that wisdom, show off that experience, and show off that the idea that you had made this decision and you know what path you need to be on now. It's not like willing, like, oh, I could do this, but I could do that, and maybe I'll change my mind. And that you get sometimes when you're finding your way when you're younger. And so I think employers would say appreciate that. And I think the only other thing I would say is, if you have energy for it, it doesn't matter how old you are. It's the enthusiasm that counts. That's something that we value, and we see it, and it's just that that focus, I think, will go quite far for you.
I like how Jen approached that. I think the only thing I would add is that I've seen with women I know who have re-entered the profession, that they've lamented the fact that they are put directly into PM roles, project manager roles, instead of like having to do details. The stereotype is bathroom details or like wall details. You don't have to do the rough stuff. You're kind of put in you have a different skill set that you're bringing in, which is so valuable. That maturity is definitely a good asset. And so that's always a challenge, that depending on what path you want within a firm or the role you want to be on the team, if you are being placed in a role that you don't desire, to communicate that and say, no, I really do want to learn this aspect of architecture, even though, and as you're learning first 5-10 years of actual practice, you start to see where your skills are growing and where you can put your strengths forward for a team, but it's nice in the beginning to be able to learn about the full gamut.
I would add too, I think it's kind of a compliment to what both Jenna and Katie have said. Design at its best is a collaborative process. And so I think, the wisdom that you're bringing with that, it's nice because it's very much about, you can handle and deal with difficult situations, or handle project challenges and things like that by even starting the dialogue, asking the right questions, things like that go a long way, even if you don't quite know the answer. It's very much about how you can facilitate those conversations in order to get to a solution. And so I would say, in that, kind of open communication and using some of those, even just sort of people skills. And then framing that architecturally in order to kind of push the team and push a project forward. And I also think there's room to be honest about what you know and what you don't know and where you want to improve, no matter what age you are. And you may even find that you have, like, I actually just met with someone a couple weeks ago. She is a friend of my boss's, and she left the profession, I would say 20 years ago, and is looking to come back in. She decided to raise her kids, and now she's looking to come back. And so it was a really interesting thing, again, and you can imagine my boss is a little bit older than I am. So to kind of be on the other side of the table, giving advice, to someone who, if you just look at our ages, I should really be asking the questions to her, that there was something really, I thought that was really wonderful about just her level of openness and, treating me for the respect that I had, or the experience that I have, and being willing to learn from my younger voice. And I think that when you can come to the table at a firm and kind of glean from people's experiences, regardless of age, regardless of what you look like or whatever, but again, like, really get in there and learn and pull those things together and learn from those things really quickly, you'll have a lot of success. And honestly, I think, you work 8 hours, probably plus a day, you'll get comfortable and you'll feel like you've been doing this for a number of years pretty quickly. So I would just add that.
That was fantastic. Really fantastic advice. I feel like I also was learning there. We'll go to the next audience question. Thank you, everyone who's putting questions in the chat. There's still a little time, so if you have more to get in there, don't worry about it. Go add those questions. But within the AIA, a lot of the leadership is male dominated, but numbers attending and graduating from architecture schools are increasing in numbers for women. How do you think this will impact future AIA leadership, and what difference would it make to how things are being handled today? And then I personally would just add, because I'm curious, how you think that's affecting the overall profession. I think being younger myself, there's, a little bit of a lack of awareness of, like, okay, I know it was different 10 years ago. I know it was different 5 years ago. I know things have changed culturally within architecture, especially surrounding the number of women in the profession. But, how is that changing? What things can we look forward to, or can, say we've really done it, we've really changed things? So this question is about AIA leadership, but personal curiosity, if you want to also add in kind of about the profession and what you've seen change, that would be helpful.
I'll jump in. I think, so yeah, I do. I've looked at these numbers, certainly, as I'm sure many of you have, and as part of when I was working on the AIA Equity and Diversity Committee in Chicago, we certainly looked at these a lot, and we kind of looked at the spectrum of, we looked at certain pinch points, I guess, in people's careers, right? And you do see this unfortunate trend where there is a good amount of women's in academia and in studying architecture. It's like 50-50, right? But then you get out and in the profession, and the number of women that are actually, licensed architects further along in their career is just like, it just drops off, right? And so that can be attributed to certain pinch points. We talked a little bit about like family life, right? And so we are still, struggling to figure out and allow those doors to not be, closed when you are having a family. And this idea of returning to work and being able to allow for that. Those things are changing. Those things are getting better, I think. We still have a long way to go. But in particular, this question is about, how do we see things changing for AIA or for our profession? Man, I mean, I think I having more perspective, having more diversity, having more diverse perspectives, right? I think it only helps in terms of how we shape our futures, right? And how we start to allow for more creative thinking, more opportunities for all, for all kinds of things, right? We've been, quite honestly, we've been living in a small with blinders on and within this narrow lane of sorts. So imagine when you start to take those off, when you start to add different perspectives to it, right? The outcomes, and it's proven, right, that the outcomes of that mean that you have richer thinking and that you have more innovative and you're more inventive and you're more you can have much more impact and you get places faster. So that's what I think is going to happen when when the doors are opening up and we start to equalize the numbers and we get more perspective in there, be it women or just, different cultures, different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different ages. That's going to be that, I think the change, you'll see it evident in what we produce in the end and how we produce it. So
Yeah, I would add to that. I have always taken the approach of you have to be the change, right? And so it's really, to me, I think it's really easy to kind of sit, particularly with something like AIA, and be an outlier and be very critical of it as an organization, and the histories. But it really does take a significant step when you decide to get involved. I think is where that change starts to happen. And I personally am very involved in my local AIA chapter, and also now involved in my state chapter of AIA, and have had a lot of growth and network and all of those wonderful things as a result of it. And so I also try to encourage others to kind of take some of the same steps. There's certainly really big benefits to that. But I would say just the willingness to get involved and not just kind of show up to an event, but to be a leader at whatever level becomes available, that can get you to a path where you're moving forward. So I entered AIA Triangle as I think they call us task force members now, but as just a member of, before I was licensed, of the Design Awards Committee. At the time, I was like, what can I do to kind of amplify my voice and my experience as a designer and be seen that way inside and out of my firm? So I joined the committee. 6 years later, this year, I ended up being chair and co-chair of that committee during a pandemic. Great. But it was still a wonderful experience. But what I found was that through meeting people, through working with the executive director, through having relationships with other task forces and putting events on, they get really excited about someone who is bringing a different voice, a lot of times a more youthful voice, because sometimes professionally, that's where you have maybe your older membership. And, there's a little bit of a gap between when you kind of transition out of AIAS, you're trying to find a job, you're trying to get licensed, and you don't really maintain that level of involvement in AIA professionally. But I would recommend people come back to it. And there's always an opportunity to kind of grow as a leader, even in your community, through AIA. So when those things happen, and then when we encourage people that are diverse and look like us or don't look like us, but that are qualified and would bring wonderful things and ideas to the community to, to take ownership of these roles, I think that's when you start to see change. And for me locally, we have I've seen a lot of women involved in these leadership roles, and we just kind of keep pushing each other on and pushing each other forward. So yeah, I think the change is going to be positive, and if you don't see it happening already, I certainly think what you see in school, that combined with mentorship that we keep talking about, is certainly a positive forecast for what AIA has in store to come.
I think my local AI is similar, Vache, that there's a lot of women involved already, and I've never felt like that was a barrier. But I would just advocate that I didn't know what AIA was or why. What does it mean to sit in a meeting once a month and just talk? What happens with talking? Well, from 2015, when I started just sitting in a room with people talking, within 4 years, I was leading the committee, and we spoke at state conventions and a national convention about culture. And that was like, talking can do stuff. And like, here I am, 31 years old, talking in front of almost 300 people with two other my co-chairs of EPC. And where it's like, I haven't led a company, I haven't done anything, but we've done our research and we're talking from a voice that's authentic. And we're offering it to the profession. We're offering it to AIA to consider. A lot of the innovation I've seen has been going outside of the profession. And so that's where the women are going. People leave architecture, and sometimes we lament that they're not going to be architects. And I love being an architect, but I'm starting to realize that like taking different paths, like they're carrying that mentality of being an architect with them wherever they go. They're finding fulfillment wherever they go. And they're taking that understanding of the value architects bring to projects, and they're infiltrating other parts of communities with the idea that, yes, architects are needed. And so I'm hopeful that more of that will, because of how many architects we lost in 2008. It's just crazy. And I don't want that to happen with the 2020. And I don't think it is. Billings are up, which is great. But yeah. Going back to AIA leadership, it's weird. I didn't think it would have any dividends or any returns, but things happen. That's interesting.
I'm tying on to that. I do believe, awareness goes a long way, right? And that means we talk, we have conversations, right? And you can get just one or two new people to that conversation, and that person can get one or two new people to that conversation. Look at how that spreads, and and those like eyes will be wide open. Like there are some people that they have never partaken in a conversation like this, right? And when they do, it's pretty momentous, and that that starts that chain of events, right? That's what we need. That's what you need to start. And then I believe that the next step really is that what you guys were both talking about, which is action. We're just doing it, like getting in there and like taking that leadership role, like just not because it's a leadership role, just because you want to make the change. So somebody's got to do it. So mine as well, right? I mean, that was my thing, was like, okay, fine. I think I should just take this on, and I ran with it. And, you get people to help you out on these committees, and you get, you rally the group around you, and you make change, and so you act on it. So to me, it's the duality of awareness and action. And through that, we'll see the repercussions of it, and we'll see the fruits of it, right?
Yes. Oh, no, just so much good stuff from all of that. Thank you all so much. And I love, Jen, how you just wrapped that up. If you want to see the change, just do it. Everyone knows I love to remind us that our theme for the year is take action. And so that's what we're always calling our students to do. And especially as they move into the profession, keep doing that. Don't let it end here with the AIS. So I know we're just about at time, but I would love to ask one final question. And maybe as I ask this last question, if you also want to leave our audience with a final piece of advice or closing statement before we close out. My last question is just, what are you excited about for the future of architecture and the future of the profession? Just a small question.
I'd like to piggyback off of what Jen said about being involved. You as young architects and aspiring architects bring so much more than you realize with you. The profession used to be learn how the architect draws and copy it. It's not that way anymore. We are new modeling programs, new sustainability. There's so much knowledge that you bring from where you are right now in school into a firm. And so yes, you're learning, but you are also giving to that firm. And I would just encourage you to pursue more and be involved.
I'll add to that. I completely agree. I think what excites me about architecture right now is that I think people are waking up, it's becoming like so woke, which is great. These things, these issues that used to kind of be on the periphery of practice are now really moving to the core, from diversity, inclusion to sustainability, and really aggressive approaches to sustainability in a good way, like net zero negative carbon footprints in buildings. And so all of these things kind of coming to the core of what we do and how we approach and practice design is really fascinating. So I would say advice wise, whatever, use kind of your education in your time in school to explore all of these wonderful themes and topics, and figure out maybe where some of your interests may lie. And that should help, guide you and let you know, find a place, a firm that'll support those and can support your growth in those. And even if not, I think it's good to have, because you have this sort of place that you can return to and remember why you began to embark on this journey in the first place. So yeah, to me, that's what's exciting. There's a lot of those very powerful, world-changing topics that you can become both architect and advocate in the way that you progress your career and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm excited about for the future of architecture is you all. Like, your generation is exciting. I think you guys are empowered. You have a voice. You have a voice. You know how to use it, and in ways that I think my generation, is just starting to figure out. And we are. I see my generation and our previous generations as carving some pathways, clearing the path. I'm hopeful that we've done enough of that so that what you guys get to do is you don't have to carve and dig anymore, but you guys just get to do. You get to make it happen. You get to advance the ball. You're like, you spread your knowledge wealth, and all your energies are creative, and you are going to solve all of our problems. No, I'm just kidding. But you're going to be able, I believe, and I want to believe that you're going to have more space to put in those positive energies. So that's super exciting to me. That's what I hope for you all. And I would say, if there's advice, maybe two things. One, be persistent. I know for me that earlier in my career, when I first wanted to, it was one of the offices that I wanted to work at. They hired me as an intern, and they basically said, yeah, because you wouldn't stop nagging us, like, go away. But to me, that was persistence. Okay. So if you are interested in something, you really want to pursue it, like, try and do it when, whatever you need to do, to kind of make that happen for yourself. And to tie to that, my last thing is also to just be true to yourselves, to be you, it takes time. It took me time to kind of find my way. It'll take you time, maybe less time than me. But always remind yourself that you should be true to yourself. Architecture is a creative endeavor. It's also many other endeavors, but that creativity comes from you and your persona, your own individuality. And, you know, you don't have to emulate somebody else to get to that path. You can find your own way. You can do it your own way. You know, you set your goals, and, you know, in the end, it kind of doesn't really matter how many different crazy pathways you take, as long as you make it there, right? So that to me all just means, like, do it your own way, be your own person, you know, celebrate that, enjoy it, because the world is accepting of it, you know, and that's a good thing. That's an amazing thing.
Wow, thank you all so much. That was so encouraging. I feel like I'm like 10 pounds lighter. I can just, float on a cloud and go do the things. I really appreciate all of our panelists' time. Verche, Katie, Jen, thank you so much for donating your time to us and being so generous with all your experiences and encouragement. I've definitely, of course, learned a lot, and I think we have a very engaged audience here who's very thankful as well. And of course, shout out to everyone who is taking their own time, especially our students who are busy, maybe approaching final season, getting through the year. Definitely thank you all so much. And we say it every time, we are going to post these recordings. They will be up on the website, so you can definitely share and rewatch during the studio working sessions. Absolutely. But thank you again, everyone, for participating. And again, thank you so much for our panelists for your time. And we'll leave it here for the night. Thank you, everyone.